Dear brothers, morning voice. So, as I have been working through the initial parts of the Heroic Man book, I have undoubtedly wrestled again with loss in my own life. So, with my dad passing away specifically. And I've probably journaled 1,000 times on handling loss. I've read God knows how many books on handling loss, and I've done all of those things. And there's a couple of truths that I've pulled out of that I think a lot of you who have lost someone may benefit from, or you may understand, or it may help you wrestle with your own loss, especially if it's new. But one of the questions that people like me have asked others who have had loss or looked for in books is, does it ever get easier? Does carrying that mourning, carrying that loss, does it get easier? Does the weight get less? Is the pain ever less? And the answer is no. The pain always feels relatively the same. And one of the interesting distinctions is I can think back on times that I've had a torn muscle, a broken bone, a burn, whatever, that physically hurts. Very painful in the moment. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. Hurt my back, whatever. And I can remember those pains, but they don't sting me anymore. I recall them. Loss is not like that. Losing someone that you love is an enduring pain, if you will. The difference being is that in the beginning, it's there all the time. You feel it constantly in your bones every day. You push it to the back of your mind and you focus on other things. But in the opening acute phase of that loss, it doesn't just flit away. And over time, you just have less of those events. You have less of those times where it's at the forefront. But as you think about it, or if you have a memory or you see a picture, someone asks you about it, that pain comes right back. I can still feel my dad's loss as much today as I could 10 years ago. It doesn't dissipate the way that a lot of people think that it should just go away. And maybe they shove it aside or they don't want to face it. And I don't agree with that. I think you should reflect and think on people you've lost. It just shouldn't keep you from enjoying the world and moving forward. But the aspect of it getting easier is certainly a farce. However, I think of it more along the lines of people are asked, does it get easier? The pain doesn't get easier, and we carry that load no matter what. But instead of looking at it as, I'm carrying this load and I don't like to do it. It bothers me. I want to let this load go. I don't want this anymore. That's just not how loss works. And it's far more important that your strength gets better to handle the loss than to try and rid yourself of it entirely. Because when you try to rid yourself of it, eventually it's going to come back into your mind and you just don't have the strength to tolerate it. It brings you to your knees. And so I actually learned to embrace the fact that there was loss in my life. And there's a couple of ways that I've done this. And one of the first was, as opposed to, you've probably heard the phrase, those are some tough shoes to fill. Those are some tough boots to step into. And I've always thought that way about my dad. My dad was an incredible man. He had his vices later in life, but he was an incredible father. And that is going to be displayed in some pieces in the book. But I don't see myself as filling his shoes, especially as his only son. I'm the only legacy coming down from a, son perspective. I'm just carrying the torch. I'm not filling his shoes. I'm not trying to be him, but I am going to take the torch of goodness that he had, throw away all the other vice, learn from it, but take the torch and keep moving forward. If his loss makes it where I can't do that, I'm neglecting my duty as a good son and as a man trying to come up in the world. So that's part of it, is you take that loss and you go, okay, this has happened. It hurts. It stings. I am almost buried under that loss. It's so heavy. But every day I wake up, I put one foot in front of the other, and I go to work, and I make relationships, and I find things that make me joyful, and I find peace. And every time I do that, I get stronger, and I stand up a little bit taller with that load. And that load hasn't changed. It's still there. It still weighs on me. But as time goes on, because I've pushed forward, I become stronger and I can carry that further. And then it becomes a source of energy. Obviously, nothing gets better without resistance to it. You have to push through something, and by pushing through, you get stronger. But what I have found is that as life has gone on, as I've gotten further away from that day in March of 2014, my dad's loss, as tragic as it was, has only become fuel for me. I treat it, and I've talked about this before, people think of loss as leaving a hole in your heart, and I don't anymore. I used to. But all that loss is where someone you hold dear was in your heart. There's a brand that is placed on there. And that brand is like a big book of memories of your loved one. And anytime you want, you can go back into that memory book and look through. Times that you went fishing, times that you played ball out in the front yard, times that you had fights, times that you sat on, I think about when I was a kid sitting on my dad's lap watching a cartoon on Saturday morning before we went to the ball fields and I had Little League. I can go back and rehearse those memories like I'm doing them all over again. And that brings me immense joy. So the loss can't control you when you look at it that way. The loss can't put you into this place of paralysis when you look at it like that. That loss becomes a strength. I find it dutiful to look at it that way. I believe wholeheartedly that when you lose somebody, no matter how old they are, even if they are, grandpa, grandma, and they're at the end of their life anyways, it still stings. Yes, it stings a lot when they are younger, when something tragic occurs, and to mourn that matters more than you know. However, it is our duty as the ones left behind, if you will, to carry their torch forward, to live well, to put one foot in front of the other. I imagine to myself, Viktor Frankl has talked about this, if the roles were reversed and you had to suffer on earth while somebody had passed away. If I think about if my roles were reversed with my dad, if I had died tragically and my dad was the one who lived, the amount of suffering that he would have to go through on earth is unthinkable, innumerable. And he was spared that suffering by being the one who went to heaven a little bit earlier than we would have wanted, maybe. And that can actually be something that you find purpose in. My purpose is to live well, to handle the suffering that comes from loss, to carry it with my chin up and to do it in an honor-bound way. And sometimes that can be enough. That's my job, is to carry my old man's flame through the world, hopefully give it to my own children, give it to my friends, give it to other men. It's one of my purposes in life, is to embolden and encourage all the people listening to this and beyond who want to be real men. And that can be enough. And so I'll wrap this up today. I just want all of you guys who are struggling with loss, friend, family, etc., just understand that it is our job to carry the torch of those who came before us, to carry the torch of our loved ones. And their loss will hurt pretty much the same for the rest of time. It'll do it less often. You won't notice it as much, but when it's there, it's there. And I think that that's actually meant to be. We're meant to feel that because we had an emotional connection to somebody that we loved. I don't want them to disappear from my mind. I don't want them to be gone from my memories. That's not something you should want. What you should want is to be able to go visit them in the corners of your mind whenever you want. I always imagine to myself that over by my dad and I used to go to this headlight in Maine called Bug Light. And we would go out there and we'd sit and we'd have lunch and we'd talk about life when I was working with him as a kid. And I was, between the ages of 10 and 15, essentially, when we did this for the most part. We would sit out there and laugh and talk and what have you. And across the way, there's a little island. And so I've always imagined to myself that there's a little house on that island, log cabin. My dad and I loved log cabins. I imagine there's a log cabin out there, and out at the front by the beach, there's 2 Adirondack chairs. And there's 2 glasses of whiskey and 2 cigars sitting there. And whenever I want to go talk to my dad, in my mind, I go out there and I walk through the house. I feel the breeze. It's this cool Portland, Maine, summer day. And I go out there, I sit down, and my dad and I just talk about life. We talk about struggles I'm having. We talk about whatever. And it is a very special moment, and it hurts. It stings because I know that he's not here on earth. I know that he's not around to actually share a cigar and a glass of whiskey with me. I know that he's not going to be physically here to see my future children. He's never met my wife. And even though that stings immensely, it stings as I sit here talking about it, it's so beautiful to carry that legacy forward and to be the one who's called to do that. I think that there is no greater honor you could have than to carry forward the blessings and the legacy of those that came before us. Even if they're not just your parents, it could be friends. It could be a friend you lost. It's your job to carry their name forward and their message, even if it was one that was sad, to teach other people about it. That's the burden that you bear as the one who survives the loss. I'm going to leave you guys with that today. Maybe a little bit heavier on a Tuesday, but I think it's important that we start looking at loss a little bit differently than we do and look to embrace it more than try to delete it. Deleting it doesn't help you. That actually is putting a hole in your heart. Don't do that. Use it, embrace it, treat it as something where you are the one going forward. It's your job to go forward and handle that loss and bring something good into the world through it. I love you all. God bless. Be strong. Let's get after it today. We'll see you, boys.